All right. I am having a deep dive conversation to one of the programs I use for coaching endurance athletes, TrainingPeaks, and found out after all these years, someone I've heard about for years is I didn't connect the two together that you're the founder for
Yeah.
TrainingPeaks. So we're going to talk to Dirk Friel about how to improve the aging process using training peaks, using metrics, how to work as a holistic approach as I do as a coach. And I really wanted to ask questions and how do we get all this information to help people thrive as they age? So I appreciate you making time for the
Yeah.
show today.
Super. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on, Debbie.
Well, you are a wealth of knowledge and you've had years of experience and you've got a father that probably taught you a lot, I'm sure, so over the years.
Yep.
So talk about what your purpose, passion, mission we were talking about earlier via email, but really I love to ask people what brings you to this place because you really have given a lot to our world as in the endurance world that I am in over the years. But tell me your story.
Yeah, thanks. Oh gosh. I mean, in terms of the roots of Training Peaks and origins of it, I was a professional cyclist for about 12 years and this is in the 90s and I was a cyclist at heart from age 12 on.
Mhm.
I dropped out of college my first year. I moved to Belgium, got a one-way ticket to Belgium, and that was 1989. And so I was pro through the 90s. And probably about 97, I started coaching with my father, and that was kind of the family business was coaching endurance athletes.
Mhm.
And I retired in 2002 from pro cycling. So the last few years I was coaching and racing. And come to find out, coaching back then was basically sending programs through the fax machine and email attachments. And then you would get pieces of paper coming back through the machine or email attachments back of the training log and heart rate files and power files. And you had four different attachments on every single email. And that's how you're trying to manage all this crazy
Yeah.
data, right? And it was actually, it was horrible trying to manage all of that. So this is the late 90s and figured, there's this thing called the internet. Hey, dad, let's figure out a way to leverage the internet, and just imagine one place to log in. Coaches and athletes they could access their calendars, their training log, their training data. And so luckily the best man at my wedding and a teammate, Gear Fisher, was the only web developer I knew in the entire world. And I hit him up with the idea, and he had a day job, and I was still racing, but we just stayed up late at night, putting this thing together. And really, initially, it was just an internal project for our own coaching business, so we could deliver a better quality service to our athletes and make my job as a coach much, much easier. And I could just be more efficient. And that's exactly what it did when we went live in 2000. It immediately helped me as a coach immensely. And then we started to, provide access for other coaches to use it. And from that moment on, I actually started coaching less and less, and I started focusing on the business, this new software business of ours that we kind of just stumbled into. We had no business plan, no debt. It was just sweat equity we threw into it, and it grew from day one and continues to grow. So I'm very, very thankful for that and how it's played out. So I guess my why, I've thought about this a lot in the past, and it really is the same for the last 25 years. It's really helping coaches and athletes both, reach their potential. So as a business, I like think of myself as helping coaches become more efficient, more effective, deliver a better quality service, so they can in the end help their athletes reach their goals and their potential. And that's been the same for 25 years, every single day. Just it's been the same mission and same goal, and
Mhm.
my purpose, if you will, has not changed. We haven't pivoted, if you will, but technology has certainly changed along the way. But it's still rooted in, the internet. So
Mhm.
thankfully, that's what's been a consistent thing in terms of technology along the way. But there's been a lot of advancements along the way. So we've morphed a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm really a big believer in having a purpose to
Mhm.
your workouts, having a plan and having direction. So you're just not try this, try that, get stuck in the cycle there. So,
Yeah.
I do metabolism testing, figuring out your heart rate zones as we talk to your dad, whoever, how do you want to
Yeah.
call him? Joe.
Joe. Yeah. My dad, Joe.
Joe, Joe Friel, the Marathon Bible book taught me a lot, long time ago. All of his books he's written, but really using data to figure out, all right, here's where the client is at, how we can test, but using Training Peaks to figure out a program for someone if they're training for their first half marathon or maybe a 5K race. It doesn't have to be a marathon, but just how it can organize a workout based on a goal, an event, and really have a plan and being able to course correct as we go, learning from people's successes and areas of opportunities. But how do you find it's best for someone starting out using a program as Training Peaks from the client side? How
Yeah.
it is so much more beneficial than just winging a program and not working with a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, you could just simply record what you did today, but really the secret sauce is figuring out what to do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And the real secret is the sequencing of those workouts to the individual. So yes, you can start with a training plan. You can buy a training plan from Training Peaks. Um, but yet you will get a lot further along and better results and maybe more satisfaction along the way if you're getting that individualized training, from a human coach. So we're definitely human first. We believe that, experienced, knowledgeable coaches are the way to go. I think starting with the training plan is great. If you are beginning, it can get you a long ways. I mean, consistency is number one. Getting out the door and doing consistent training is number one. But then as you advance as an athlete, you then need to kind of mix it up and get more individualized programming. You also are a human. You have a family, you have a work life. You have to balance all of these things. You might only have 8 hours a week to train. So how do you make the most of that 8 hours? That becomes difficult to decide, right, on your own. So having that third party that's knowledgeable to help guide you along the way, and you actually get a lot of great. Once you get that connection with the human coach, it's amazing how you look forward to it. You finish a workout, and you can't share that experience oftentimes with your spouse. And so, getting that feedback from a coach that really understands and like you get a nice warm fuzzy feeling inside, and that gives you a lot of motivation for tomorrow's workout as well. So certainly start with a training plan. It's a great way to get started. But I think for anyone working with a human coach, whether that be an hour long consultation once a month or an actual day-to-day programming, one-to-one premium coaching. There's a vast array of services that coaches provide. So yeah, that's how I suggest people get started. But consistency is the number one thing, and most people train too hard, and that's even more so the case the more, I guess, beginner you are, you just think every day needs to be hard. And that is definitely not the case. Moderation along with consistency and intensity control. Intensity control is the hardest thing to figure out on your own. It's almost impossible to figure that out on your own if you don't have the experience, and that kind of scientific background and knowledge. So yeah, there's just some quick tips on how to get started.
So as you've had Training Peaks start in 2000, 2000,
2000.
pretty much. So 24 years, what have you seen change the most that you have had kind of maybe course correct or added to it? Because you just mentioned the
Yeah.
metrics, intensity control, training too hard. There's a lot of different things, what do you call it? Feedback on there as RSS and just the training. So what would you say you kind of
Yeah.
have to add in based on experiences from the athletes and coaches?
Well, from day one until today, we've always been focused on the more holistic view and the broader view. Again, like, today's workout is not going to make or break you, but it's more about the consistency over time.
Mm,
So from the beginning, we've been really focused on the trends over time, but what you track over time certainly has changed. And as now, power meters are much more affordable, accessible. Almost all triathletes and cyclists have them now. So it's a much more precise way of measuring the intensity. And that certainly was not the case, 20 plus years ago. But the fundamentals are still there, tracking the intensity, usually, based upon a threshold, if you will, of, how intense was today's workout. Training zones matter a lot from day one until today. Time in training zones really matter a lot. Um, so I think heart rate is always has stood the test of time. We still rely a lot on heart rate, especially for like trail runners now. You don't have reliable power meters on, running a trail, but you do have rate of perceived exertion. So I also believe a lot in the subjective side of data, not just all the objective data coming in. So, if today doesn't feel right, it's okay to take it off. And, subjectively, I had a bad night's sleep. I'm having a lot of stress at work. I need to do this, or the schedule says I need to do 3 times 20 minutes at zone 4 today. Like, it's okay to say no. Like, I just know it's the wrong thing. And in deep in, you kind of know it's the wrong thing. And if
mm,
you're working with a coach, open up to the coach about, hopefully they're giving you the A-OK to make those decisions on the fly. And then they're there to back you up and then adjust tomorrow's workout. So I think technology has changed in terms of what we track. Now there's all kinds of new, HRV, muscle saturation devices, gosh, core body temperature devices. Like we can track all that stuff. You can get very, very deep in the weeds with all of it, but they don't all have equal importance, right? So I think technology has changed a lot. It's always going to be evolving. And I look forward to that. That's why it kind of always feels like a startup. There's always new things to do. That's what's really fun about it. But I think sound training principles are still there, like through and through from the beginning until today.
mhm. Yeah. So with the people tend athletes, especially if you're training for something, or maybe you're new. Most people are high performers, type A,
Yeah.
driven,
Yeah.
ambitious. They don't pay attention to those red flags that are there, and they don't know how
Yeah.
to use intuition. So, what have you done over the years to help people be aware of, okay, maybe you have some red flags here, you've been overtraining and under recovery?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have red flags in terms of, sleep metrics. A lot of people sleep with a device, a Whoop, or whatever it might be. We're collecting that data. Those can be red flags, to you or the coach. Um, I think like overall, for me, again, it's about data over time. And so when you get into your second year of collecting data, the data becomes infinitely more powerful because if you're on day one collecting data, you have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
See, unfortunately, you got to collect a bunch of data, and see the trends. But once you enter year 2, 3, 4, it's like, wow, awesome. Okay, where did the athlete go really well? Where did they set their personal bests? When did they feel really good? When did they get sick? When did they get injured? These are things we want to either replicate or try and stay away from. So how did we create that peak and how did we get to that really good performance? Let's try and replicate that. Um, there's certain metrics that we track, like training stress balance. Effectively, you have your fitness, fatigue, and form. If you're pushing your fitness constantly, your fatigue actually is going to continue to increase over. It's just going to week over week, your fatigue is just going to grow. You have to have those times where you freshen up. And so we graphically show that in what's called a performance management chart. And each person has their own unique kind of trends throughout the season and where they felt good and bad. And oftentimes those correlate. So when your training stress balance is very negative, that's probably a time when you're feeling fatigued, you might get sick or injured. Likewise, if you took a lot of time off, your training stress balance will go really, really positive. In effect, that's detraining. So we don't want to detrain either. So again, there's kind of like these checks and balances within some of our charts and graphs that we have in TrainingPeaks. So the performance management chart is really a great place to start, but you need 6 weeks worth of data to really kind of allow it to take shape and have meaning. Um, so yeah, and then I like to look at, time and zone. I mean, certainly, a zone 4 or 5, very, very hard training time. You can only do so much of that per week. I also like to look at the distribution of pace. Most people kind of regress, they have regression to the median. So they kind of go out every day the same pace, and they're always trying to push the same pace, but they sort of like just end up in this middle gray zone. And I think we need more training variability. You need to learn what an easy day, a truly easy day feels like, as well as what a really hard day feels like. And we need a mixture of both in training so that it's that's again the super secret sauce is how to create those waves, because fitness is not just linear.
Mhm. How do you measure the training stress balance?
Yeah.
What's that coming from?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it kind of boils down to what we've termed the training stress score. So you can have a pace based training stress score through running. So you have your Garmin watch, you go for a flat run, your threshold pace may be an 8 minute mile. And so if you did one, just for example, if you 45 minutes at 8 minute pace, that would be 100 TSS points, right? So most of your training needs to be less than threshold. The intensity factor needs to be lower than your threshold. So the majority of your training is going to be zero point 0.6, something like that. Intensity factor, you take that, behind the scenes, it's all math and it's multiplied by the duration, and it comes up with a training stress score for the day. You can start to compare days, doing that workout over time creates what we call the chronic training load. So the chronic training load is your accumulation of your daily training stress score points over 6 weeks, 42 days. Um, and as that grows, along with it is your acute training load, which effectively is your fatigue. And your acute training load is going to build faster than your fitness. If you go to a really hard week, you will build fitness. But guess what? You're going to build fatigue a lot faster. You're
Mm.
not going to do a really hard week right leading into your really important race. Why? Because you're going to be fatigued on that day. You need to build fitness, but you're going to build a lot more fatigue, and then you need to taper, freshen up, and let that form shine through. And that's the training stress balance. So that when you show up on race day, you're in a positive state, a positive TSB. So really, this all comes back to either pace. You're going to the TrainingPeaks will calculate your training stress score based off running pace, heart rate, so heart rate threshold, or power. So cycling power, just watts. But we're really kind of I guess it's all based on your threshold power, threshold heart rate, or your threshold pace.
And just to define people what threshold means, is that lactate threshold, your
Yeah,
feed
yeah, it's
switch
kind of all
threshold
over
versus
the map.
threshold?
If you don't go to the lab, we call it functional threshold power or functional threshold. You can do a simple test, maybe a 45-minute all-out running, field test. That would be your FTP for run, your pace, your heart rate. Um, in cycling, that would be a 1 hour time trial. Some people do 20 minutes and subtract 5% to call it their FTP. But it's better to go in the lab. Not many people actually go to the lab and get tested, but that's the gold standard. Go to the lab, find out your threshold, and then you would plug that into TrainingPeaks for your heart rate and power threshold. But again, to make things simpler, to get everybody kind of in the system, the quick and easy way to do it is just a functional threshold test out in the field.
Yeah, we did a whole podcast a few months ago with Joe Friel on field
Mm,
testing. So I got
yeah,
a whole hour
exactly.
of that.
Well, and then you can repeat it, and you can repeat it and see progression hopefully along the way. Yeah, testing is definitely a really good thing to do. And there's all kinds of different tests. They don't all have to be 100% all out, just horrible, experiences. Like a zone two test. You know, I love doing like a zone two test where it's just like 2 hours steady state, same power, and then we track heart rate and see that decoupling over time. And that's a test in itself as well. The fitter you get, the less decoupling you have. Power will stay the same, and you'll have less heart rate drift as you get fitter. So that's actually kind of I don't know. I look forward to that kind of test.
On the bike.
Yeah, that's on the bike. You can do it running too. It's yeah.
If people want to run 2 hours, but that'd be good
No,
flat to
I'd
run the
probably do
bike.
an hour. Again, you'd switch it up for running.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I think it's really important for people to get baseline data and then retest whichever way you're doing it every 3 months. How often do you suggest retesting to see where they are?
In a way, training is testing. I do formalize testing. I tend not, I don't think about it monthly. I think about it in terms of training blocks.
Hmm.
So if we are now, okay, it is November right now, and let's say you're going to start base period January 1st, I would love to test at the end of the December. Like, where are we starting? And then let's say we're going to come out of base end of February. I would love to retest, beginning of March. You go into a build phase. So, I would rather place the testing around actual training periodization so that we can see the results of the hard work and then learn from it and then tweak it going forward.
Yeah, I think more information we can get is important, but also as you mentioned earlier, is intuition too, checking in with your own body, how are you feeling? Because I think so many people follow what's on their schedule and don't pay attention to, oh, I kind of feel off today, or I'm fighting getting sick, or I don't really have the energy to, but I'm going to push through it because it's on my schedule. But
I
learning
know.
intuition to do kind of a mind body, your own, take inventory.
Yeah, I think of it like in another word is like dynamic training. So listening to the body and allow training to be dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I know like I need to get these two, what we might term, my father terms breakthrough workouts. And let's say I have two breakthrough workouts this week. I kind of know where they need to be. I know how much time I kind of need between them, but I'm going to let my body tell me. So, but the first one I'm going to do on Tuesday for sure. And if things go well, I'll be ready to go Wednesday, Friday for the second one. Well, it might take longer. You might have to push Friday to Saturday. So allowing for that dynamic training load to take care of itself in a way, and you need to that takes confidence, which you can gain through coaching. I think anyone can go out there and just train hard. It's building confidence to actually say, no, today is not the day. Let's see if I feel better, for tomorrow.
We get wiser as we get older, right? We're not as
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
We don't get that when we're 30, 40 years, or even 40 years old. I think I realized that when I was 42 and my world fell apart. But I think it's, really learning from those different experiences, and you get stronger from when things break down and don't go your way. You learn something from it and just become even a better athlete.
Yeah. 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 Consistency too. If you're just pushing the envelope really, really, really hard, you tend to then need more recovery.
Mm.
Whereas if you held back a bit and had the consistency or the intensity control, you could therefore do more breakthrough workouts because you're not always having to try and recover after the huge workout you did. Every Sunday is massive, and are horrible until Thursday. Like,
Hmm.
I'd rather pull back on Sunday's workout and then have you do another good workout Tuesday and then Thursday.
Hmm. Do you have do you find that people don't know how to do zone two, which always makes me laugh saying because we've talked about for 30 years, but where you're burning the peak amount of fat and it should be conversational pace. I think people, when I do my metabolism testing, used to use New Leaf. Now I own Pinoy Metabolic
Yeah.
Cart that I test people and I always ask them back in the day, 1995 is gosh, so long ago. These new leaf testing,
Yeah.
I always would do film afetones, the 180 minus your age, and then test them and see, oh my gosh, is that in line with that formula? And then today I was asked people, where are you training? Where do you think is kind of that sweet spot where you can go for a long time and feel comfortable? And then I test them and I see their fuel source is really more carbohydrate than fat. So I think a lot of people don't know how to feel comfortable, easy. I can stay here for a long time. Do you find that?
Yeah. No, it's awesome if you have the lab results to show them objectively where they're sitting and then get them to internalize that feeling. So
Mm,
go out and do this workout for 2 hours or whatever it might be and internalize that feeling. But then when they come back and you, the coach, see the data, you sort of have to slap them on the wrist if they went above it because their ego is going to get the best of them. Whether they're
yes.
by themselves and they're like, I felt really good though the first 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Well, yeah,
Mm,
but that was,
it's supposed
or
to.
they're with a group. They're with a
Yeah.
group. They go too hard with the group. So
Yeah.
I always, as a coach, thought about a lot of people think about posting like target this really high value, but oftentimes I would put a governor on the effort. And I would say, I don't want you going above this power or heart rate. I'd put a governor on the effort. Sometimes I would do a combination. I'd say, okay, go out at whatever it might be, 220 watts. But if your heart rate goes above 145, then switch to heart rate and don't allow your heart rate to go above 145, independent of power. So putting those governors in place and teaching people and showing them in the data where they went too hard, because you do pay for it later on, and you're not targeting, that substrate utilization, focus that you so much want as a coach. And it can be boring, right? Especially on the bike, you're training for whatever it might be, a 5+ hour Ironman bike. You're going to have to do some long rides at a really boring pace, and you might have to do it by yourself because your ego gets in the way when you go with the group.
That's so
And
true.
when you hit the climbs, you literally have to go to the small chain ring, don't get out of the saddle, put it in your smallest gear, and just sit there. Like that is part of training getting rid of the ego. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really hard for people to do if they come to a 2 minute hill and they know that they can smash it, but that's absolutely zone 4 or 5. Like
Yeah.
that's just not the point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a coach can go a long ways in terms of educating the athlete on how to pace better and target those zones.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people, when they start to get into endurance sports, become or are discover their competitive side. And
Yeah,
they don't know how to just hold back. And yeah, like you said, zone two, or even Peter T. I was listening to a video, he's saying, a long, slow, boring ride that you're listening to a book on podcast or something. But I feel that I was a good athlete and could do well in my age group in Ironman or marathon cycling because I rode most of my workouts alone, stayed in that zone two, so to speak, maffetone max aerobic function we did back in the
yeah,
day. And so
yeah,
when it came to race day, I could go fast and still be burning primarily fat and do well in races because I developed that. But I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around that. And in the long run, this is going to help me be faster, but I have to go slower to get
yeah.
faster.
Yeah, and recovery within the race itself is, relies so much on aerobic conditioning and that zone 2, like you're talking about. you might be racing at a zone 4, but your recovery between hills on the, as you crest a hill and coast on the backside, that amount of recovery that you get on that 30-second, um, coast down the backside of the hill goes back to that, zone 2 work, and how many, in cycling, we say matches. How many matches do you
Mm.
have? And a match might be anything over 400 watts, or, there's all kinds of scientific terms for it, but like how many matches do you have really matters. Um, and you can build more matches by going slow. It's kind of inverse.
But there's so much focus right now, especially for female athletes, to do more less zone 2 and more sprint interval training, and all the benefits to improve your VO2 max is focused on HIIT training and the 4x4 workout, whatnot. And I always felt for years with all the type of boot camp workouts that people tend to train too much up in the higher zones. Do you find that
Yeah.
in on Training
I
Peaks and
was,
how we can use Training Peaks to help us?
yeah, again, like that zone breakdown. Look at your time spent in zone per week or per month. That's a really good way to look at things, to be like, aha, like I look at that oftentimes after a workout. I'm, like, okay, I hope I didn't, if it was a hard day, awesome. Like, that's great. I want to see polarized. Like I did a 30-minute warm up in zone 1, and then I did 45 minutes worth of threshold. That should be polarized. There should not be a lot of zone 2 or zone 3 in there. It's like zone 1 and zone 4. Like, that's a pretty picture, but that's not every day, right? And so the other days are shifted to the left. You have a lot of zone 1 and a lot of zone 2. And I also love those days where it's like, bam, zero, like zero zone 3, zero 4, zero zone 5. So I think athletes should ask themselves, and not enough do this, ask yourself, what is the purpose? Like, the purpose of today's
Yeah.
workout. And the answer should not be the same every single day. They should be polar opposites. Many days should be very polar opposite of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be reflected in the data. If the purpose of today is this, then it should be reflected in the data. And so then look at the data. Did you go too hard? And, train yourself. Um, and so I like that reinforcement of looking at data. And then you can look at the data over the week, and okay, well, how much time did I project I wanted to do in zone 4 this week? Okay, I planned 90 minutes worth of zone 4. How much time did I actually do? Right. So asking those questions, then go into the data and find the answers. And then that helps train, going for, and it's never ending. You're always continually trying, and that RPE and that pacing, that internal pacing that you need to learn as an athlete. So on race day,
Mm-hmm.
you can execute. Um, yeah, I love the zones. Zones have stood the test of time.
I'm really going to sound old, but I worked with Sally Edwards,
Yeah.
Heart Zone Training
Yeah.
in
Heart rate, zone, yeah.
1995.
Polar. She was like I think she wrote a polar book or something. Yeah.
Yeah, she wrote Heart Zone training books.
Yep.
We did them. I was in Bellevue, Seattle, Washington, and we would do clinics and we'd help her with the dance and training camps, and which
Yeah.
were sprint triathlon, but we did Heart Zone training, and then we did added that into the New Leaf metabolic testing and figure out their 5 zones, but we would do testing all the time. But it's like, okay, I am really 53 years old. I used to think I'm so much younger, but now when I talk back, Sally Edwards, she was like the OG of heart rate training back
Yeah.
then. So I've been doing it
Yeah.
a
I
long
mean,
time.
and yeah, and like my big race is like 6.5 hours long, and it's got 4 really big climbs. And I try to internalize that and visualize that in
Mm-hmm.
training, in that I know the first climb I've gone out too hard before, like way too hard, and I know what that heart rate
Mm-hmm.
looks like. And therefore, what happened? I couldn't eat properly because I was going out too hard. Therefore, I got
Mm-hmm.
behind on in the first hour of the race, I was already behind on my nutrition fueling strategy, and I never caught up. And then what happened? I got nauseous. And then it was high noon and the heat was picking up and it just got worse. and so it's like, okay, learning that lesson and saying, okay, I know what this first climb needs to be, control, because that same intensity, that same heart rate zone in the first hour of the race that same pace is going to feel so much harder in the fifth hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just have to know that's coming. And so internalizing that and building that confidence in training and the pacing, so many athletes get pacing wrong, especially the long, endurance events. So training pacing in training is very, very important.
For cyclists and triathletes on the bike going by power can be misleading
Yeah.
information, can it sometimes? Because you might be switching fuel sources, but you're still stuck on I've got to keep a 250 power meter or watts.
Yeah, it's because like is instantaneous. So you look at it and you're like, oh, 300 watts. I feel amazing. I can maintain 300 watts. But it's the first 8 minutes of the race or something, and it hasn't like caught up yet.
Mm-hmm.
Heart rate hasn't caught up, everything hasn't caught up. So that's where again I like the idea of a governor, especially in like an Ironman type event, when there's climbs the first 15 minutes of the race, you know, there's a governor, the athletes saying to themselves, I should not see 300 watts in the first
Yeah.
15 minutes of this race. I expect a 6.5 hour bike or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, it's so immediate, but yet it doesn't line up with your RPE because you feel so good.
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing how to that intensity control again is really, really key. And then heart rate will catch up within, obviously 8 minutes of race, 10 minutes of the race, heart rate's, catching up to the effort. And but heart rate is, it fluctuates too. You have a hot day, you have a cold day,
Mm-hmm.
diet affects it,
Yeah.
caffeine. So again, it really so much of it comes back to that internal pacing clock, feel that you have to train with experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know I like to talk about fueling, training, and performing. So we talk a little bit about training, the performance metrics we talk a little bit about, but what about, tying in the fueling and performance recovery
Yeah.
markers with the biometrics or the metrics page that we can use on TrainingPeaks? How can we get the most out of that to help us improve recovery, repair, and performance in
Fuel
the end?
and specifically fueling.
Yeah, well, then I want to get into fueling, but how we can tie it all together because I think it's so essential. So I know on the metrics you've added a lot more over the years. What do you think are
Mhm.
priorities that we should be using on our TrainingPeaks accounts?
Oh man. I mean, I peripherally look at HRV. It doesn't make a decision for me day to day, but I
Mhm.
do like seeing the trends. I do find trends of HRV track pretty well for me. And so I will look at HRV, but it doesn't make a daily decision for me. But I know if I'm going into a deep, training block, hard training block, it'll probably match pretty well. It's going to drop. Sleep. I don't really track sleep metrics. Just hours of sleep, I think, is the number one thing there. I don't think the sleep devices really track sleep all that accurate, like REM and deep sleep and all that stuff. I don't look at that at all. It's more about waking up in the morning and subjectively, how did last night feel? How many hours did I get? What is my HRV kind of looking like? Um, yeah, from there, it's just all the subjective stuff. Mood, I track mood, motivation. I think those are key. I think they align immensely, really well with recovery. If your motivation is down, recovery is probably not going well. It's okay to take the day off. Find that mojo again. When you have that mojo and the strong motivation and your mood is really good, that's not always going to be there, but don't ruin it by, just like going out too hard, right? I tend to be like, okay, this is awesome. Mood motivation is great. All right, I can push it, but I'm going to end today knowing I could have done one more interval.
Mhm.
It's not about pushing it until you're dead every day. It's about, okay, finishing, knowing you could have done more.
Yeah.
Then hopefully you have better recovery. Then hopefully you can do another day like that 2 days from now. And again, that consistency then builds over time by controlling the moderation and
Mhm.
building in more consistency. So a lot of it is so much of it is subjective, and that's where a coach can come into play, and the coach can hear in the tone of voice or how they communicate, what they write in their journal, in the Training Peaks journal. That says a lot. It's not just all subjective data.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's where I think it helps to have even a monthly coaching call. And if people can do a weekly coaching call, just 20 minutes just to go, how are you feeling? Because you don't get that just like texting a friend versus give me a phone call. I want to hear the voice and how it sounds and your energy through your voice. You can tell a lot about someone's mood and recovery listening to them on a live
Yeah,
phone call.
yeah. Not enough athletes put that subjective data in the post workout comments. They'll just
Oh,
say
yeah.
the objective, I did 2 times 20 minutes or whatever,
Yeah.
but
I don't want to
putting
know
the
that.
subjective, how you felt. And we ask the athlete every workout in Training Peaks, like, rate of perceived exertion, how hard was this workout, and the smiley face or the frowny face, that
Yeah. I
means
made it
something.
easier. They can click on the button.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I do lab testing now as I became a nutritional therapy practitioner over the years, FDN practitioner, so I can order functional lab testing, correlate that information with a client's workouts and their nutrition plan. I know there's insulin on the metrics. How is it? Is
Mm,
there a way or something in the future we can like tie in everything together to put lab testing or even look at a
mm.
blood chemistry panel or GI It's like I always just want
Wow.
one place to put everything. It's like, how is that
Yeah,
possible?
I mean, you can attach the test results, to
Mm,
that workout, but
yeah.
we're not going to pull any data from it. That's kind of a little far afield right now for us, I think, in that medical side of things.
I know. That's why I use
Certainly,
Practice Better and TrainingPeaks. Like, can we just have one login or they
yeah,
all like work?
that's good
Mm,
feedback. Yeah, I think it's good to archive. When I get a lab test, I do archive that on that
mm.
day, and I'll upload that file as an attachment
Okay,
to the
good.
training log, or I'll put a note in there. And then
Hmm.
I'll say, hey, blood test today. I might put in the highs and lows of the blood test, but then attach it to the workout. Therefore, it's always saved there. I can easily
Hmm.
search. We have a search function in Training Peaks where you can just search blood test, and then all your blood test results come up. Now we're
Oh,
not going to aggregate that into pretty charts for you,
yeah.
unfortunately.
No, no, I don't mean
But
that,
they're
but just to have a
Yeah,
place for them. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that would be a workaround.
good. All right. And then we're talking about fueling and fuel in. I'm talking to them actually tomorrow
Mm,
and talk to them at Ironman Hawaii and Kona. And I was really watching this year, Ironman Hawaii, how
yeah,
athletes were fueling in and around their workouts, ideally, and race day. And it's always interesting to me over how many years we've been talking about, improving your metabolic efficiency and metabolic flexibility, but still watching what people are eating. It's pretty
yeah.
amazing. How are you working with nutrition part and how we can use Training Peaks to help track fueling or add in notes for fueling so they know,
Yeah.
okay, what to do differently next time, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, Fuel In, we have other third-party apps that we're compatible with. So with those apps like Fuel In, they will actually sync with Training Peaks. So they'll pull both your completed workout of the day as well as your future workout, tomorrow's workout, and then it'll return back to you guidance, nutrition guidance. So it can be tough to give nutrition guidance if you don't know what the athlete is doing or did
Yeah.
or what they plan to do. So that's really nice, complementary. Our services really are complementary to each other. So it's really cool to see that advancement happen. It's helped a lot of coaches and athletes for sure give guidance. It's today. should today be a really high carb focused day or medium or low? Um, that really people talk about the periodization of diet, and that's becoming more and more a thing to talk about. But and it's not periodization in terms of like, all right, this is a base period. We're going to be high fat for the next 3 months, and then we're going to periodize to high carbohydrate for the next 3 months. It's periodization in this sense, as far as I can tell, is more on the micro level. This day to day, a periodization of what's the purpose of today's workout. Getting back to that, the nutrition should match the purpose of the workout. So, what is tomorrow's workout, and how should I set myself up for success starting now
Yeah.
for tomorrow's workout? And then I wake up in the morning. Okay, what's the purpose of today? What's my breakfast look like? My breakfast can change. I can have an omelet on one day, and I can have pancakes on another. But let's pair these up with the purpose of the training cycle or the day's training.
Yeah.
So that's where fuel in type apps really come into play and help manage kind of the focus of the macronutrients,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of match the fuel needs from today's workout and leading into tomorrow.
Yeah, I love doing that. I think it's so huge and powerful to know that it doesn't mean no carbohydrates. It just depends on the intensity of the workout. What is your workout requiring you to use to improve performance? So it's really fascinating over the years how we went to with the fasted exercise part and when to fuel.
Mm,
And now it's like strategic carb timing that, right, do you need to eat something when you're going to go for a walk in the morning, or if I'm going to wake up and go do this type of workout? So again, it's matching your fueling with your training. I always talk about and how to work with that on an individual level, and female versus male, and then female's hormone cycle and tracking their cycle and looking at all that. I think it's really helpful in Training Peaks to be able to do all that so you can manage all those different variables.
yeah, and certainly a lot of talk now is about grams of carbohydrate per hour and how that's going up and up and up. And that's kind
Yes.
of led via the Tour de France kind of teams and athletes. And now certainly Ironman pro athletes are talking whatever it be, 150, 180 and all this, grams per hour. And I think it's again, it comes down to the individual. First of all, the bigger you are, the more power you're going to produce, the more energy you need to consume. If you're a
Mhm.
118-pound female pushing 108, 160 watts, you're just going to not need as much
Yeah.
carbohydrates as
It's not one
me
size
that
fits all.
weighs. Yeah, exactly. But there certainly is something to be learned about increasing your capability to absorb and process more carbohydrates versus only ever having a maximum of 50 grams per hour. If you can only ever tolerate 50 grams an hour, you might have room to improve by upping that, right?
Mm.
Um, and so, I've definitely thought about that a lot. Within my training, I can easily do 120 grams an hour in my races, no problem. And that's the pace I kind of focus on. I'm a bigger guy. Not everybody needs that, but it's a lot more than when I was pro. When I was pro, I was probably doing half of that, 60
Yeah.
grams an hour. And that was back in the 90s. And, so I wish I could have had these strategies back when I was actually, trying to race pro.
Racing. Yeah.
And then I think a lot of folks, they underfuel on the long training days, thinking they want to lose weight and body composition and all of this. But what it ends up doing is that they have to overcompensate, they overindulge that night or the next day. And it's a horrible cycle. Whereas if you fuel right on your long days, you're going to actually feel better at the end of the workout. You're going to get a better quality workout, and
Mhm.
you won't have to overindulge that night over pizza and beer. And then it sets you up great for the next day. But that's hard to do in the moment sometimes. You're like, oh, I'm just going to take advantage of this long ride and not eat, and it backfires. It backfires more than it doesn't.
You just said what most people do. I see run groups in the evening and bike groups. What do they go do afterwards? They
Yeah,
start and end at a certain location, a brewery or pizza.
yeah, yeah,
They
exactly. Yeah,
go
yeah. So
overindulge. Why they don't lose weight? People,
It
I
is
learned that
fun
years
though.
ago.
I have noticed like increasing my training carbohydrate intake. And I do notice, I have certain friends that like just don't like eat hardly at all. And I can
Mhm.
just tell at like this 3 hour mark, they're starting to like get, they're starting to
Yeah.
get drained and kind of lose. And you're like, what's wrong? Like, I'm starting to feel really good. Like if you can experience that, especially, against others and friends, like, it's like, it makes you feel good, right? Now you
Hmm.
want to help your friends get faster too.
Don't tell them your
Um,
secret.
yeah, but not so many people just can't do it. It can be expensive, if you're buying gels and everything, it's certainly an expensive thing, but you can get around it by having some cheaper substitutes. Um, but yeah, it's really changed a lot of my training for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to individualization, and that's what Training Peaks does. That's what we do with as coaches. Hopefully, people are working with the coach to get personalized program, or else they could just go buy a program that is on Training Peaks that are great, but it's not designed for you, the unique individual. So you get what you pay
Yeah.
for.
And I do have more of like a fasted style workouts as well, but they're far away from my races.
Yeah.
They're more in the base training period. And I know I'm not going to recover well afterwards. And I know tomorrow cannot have any intensity, but I
Mm,
will go out and do sessions where I'm fasted and don't take anything in. Another kind of workout I do where I'll start fasted in the first 2 hours, I'll take nothing, but starting the third hour, then I'll start consuming
yeah.
carbohydrates. Um, but again, I won't recover as well. Tomorrow can't be intense, but there was a purpose to that workout. It was in the base
Purpose.
training.
Hmm.
It can jeopardize my race if my race is 3 days away, so I wouldn't do that. So yeah, the timing of all that is important.
For sure. And I think that is an important part of what I use Training Peaks for and to help people is to match that fueling and training, strategically plan your nutrition and experiment because some people can do it this way, other people need it that way. Dr. Dan Plews at Endure IQ says, 60 grams of carbs. And I saw these companies at Ironman Hawaii Race Expo doing the 100, 120 grams of carbs an hour. It's like, okay, I got into this field as more nutrient timing and carb timing because I was throwing up my whole bike ride because I was
Mm,
taking in what I was told to have in an Ironman. And so I'd be racing. And then I got to learn more, Bob Seebehor and other people to learn, okay, I'm one of those people that can't take in so much because it doesn't have anywhere to go. And I just would regurgitate it all.
yeah,
It is really
yeah,
figuring out that person, how you work and how your body is able to handle that load.
yeah, and again, that does relate back to pacing too. If you go out too hard, you can't eat. Things just go worse and worse and worse through the race.
Yeah.
So learning that early and getting on top of the fueling strategy and the pacing strategy, is so important.
So I know we just have a couple minutes, but I just want to share this
Mm.
new Training
Oh,
Peaks virtual on the
very
screen. If
cool.
people watching the video, tell us a little bit about this in a minute, 2 minute view.
Yeah.
What's this
Well, we
about?
recently launched Training Peaks Virtual, as you can see here. It's an indoor cycling app. And really, it relates back to coaches are such a big part of the culture of endurance sports. And they oftentimes are the ones onboarding athletes into the sport. And they're
Mhm.
teaching the athlete, hey, go get this, go get this, go get this. And there's so many things they have to go get
Yeah.
that it's very difficult to get athletes sometimes up and running. And now obviously people are training indoors. It's very, very popular. And so it just made a lot of sense to kind of make it as seamless as possible. Your coach brings you on board with Training Peaks. There's your workout. Guess what? You can choose whether today to work out outdoors or training indoors. If you happen to ride indoors and you have a trainer, hey, go check out, Training Peaks Virtual. It syncs automatically. Your zones, your workout of the day, your structured workout. And then coaches can actually create more of a sense of community. They can create private or public group rides just for their clients or for anybody that wants to join. Every Wednesday at 3:30, here's the group ride, come join and ride with me type thing.
Hmm.
And they can have races as well. So during the winter months, if they want to add some more intensity, they can create a race series, for example. So yeah, it's really fun, really cool. In a similar regard, we launched strength training.
Yeah.
So it was
So,
always very difficult to prescribe strength training and to record it, between coach and athletes. So in Training Peaks now,
mhm.
we have set rep weight, we have video libraries. Coaches can upload their own videos, how to do whatever exercises they want their athletes to do in the gym, or it could be yoga or mobility, foam roller, whatever it might be. So again, it's just making it easier to onboard athletes and get training seamlessly with all the things that coaches now offer. So yeah, that's been really fun to launch those two new features, strength and virtual.
and we know that strength training is very important as we are aging. And I know my
Yeah.
friend Erin Carson over by you
Oh,
in Boulder, she's a
yes.
longtime friend from my
It's
Mark
awesome.
Allen Elite Triathlon team days. And she
Yeah.
is really good at getting athletes to get the strength training part. And Training Peaks has the video too. We get the building out the
Yep.
video for workouts too, I
Yep.
like.
Yep.
So it's
Erin
a good
uses
option.
our strength training with all of her pros and age groupers, and she's been great to work with. Yeah, coaches can upload their own work video libraries. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I was
Yeah,
really excited to finally have you on the show because I've used Training Peaks forever as a coach and athlete. And I think a lot of people can relate and always wonder what all this information is on there and how to best use it so we can perform our best as we age for just training for life. I say my race I'm training for is just the race
yeah,
of life, the endurance of life. Nothing
definitely.
specific. So just to live my best life, the second half of my life is my goal.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Right.
me too. Here, here.
Yeah. Strive to thrive and not struggle as we age. As I watch, well, not your dad, but my parents and my their friends when they're 80, you see them all fall apart when they don't do any of this exercise, the strength part. So
Well, my
we
dad just had
can,
a bike accident last week, so he's trying to
oh,
recover. But hey, he was out there pushing it, so it was kind of
yeah.
cool to see.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, thanks for
Amazing.
having me on, Debbie.
All right. Thanks so much.